Hello, everybody. What's going on? Welcome back. Yes, welcome back. Spring break. Okay, so today we're going to be more of the same. I hope you enjoyed your time off. I hope everybody's safe. I hope everybody's healthy. Um, we're going to be doing more of the same. Just to give you a heads up on grades, we are going to be finishing up. I think the grades that are in there now are going to be the grades for third cycle. There's one more thing I have to grade. You'll see the blank column in there. That's the genetic engineering and GMO essay, right? And here's my dog. Um, so what you see in the grade book is probably going to be the grades for third cycle, including the blank that I'm going to grade today. This stuff today and everything after this stuff today is going to be for fourth cycle. Like the work today, I'm going to collect, I'm going to grade. It's just going to be in the fourth cycle. So just to give you a heads up, I think the grades that are in the grade book, including the blank one, are what we're going to be sticking with. If you have to make anything up, that's totally fine. Just send me a private message when you're done with it. Forgot to do this, handed this in late. Check it out for me. I do not go back and randomly look at things that people didn't do. That's not what I'm doing. You have to step up and you have to look at your grade and say, okay, these are all right, or oh wait, I did that quiz. I just did it 2 weeks late. Why do I still have a 0? Private message me and tell me. All right. We're going to move into the slides. So like I said, more of the same. I'll be putting up some slides. I'll be lecturing on those slides live in case you need to say anything to me live or you have any questions. I usually go live 10 or 15 minutes after I post the material. That's so you can look at it, get a handle on it, look through the slides real quick yourself. Also, I'm sticking with the YouTube live thing instead of the meet because I know how busy you guys are, and I totally understand. I am noticing, I mentioned this before, I'm noticing that when I do go live, depending on what time it is during the day, there may only be a couple people watching. There may be 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever going live. But by the end of the day, when I go back to the classroom and I check the views on every video, it looks like everybody is checking it at a certain time and checking out the videos. So to me, it's great to go live. And just in case you need to say something live and you have a specific question, that's awesome. But at least I'm putting these videos up and you can watch them an hour later, 2 hours later. And it looks like that's what a lot of people are doing. But I prefer you go live if you can. So because this is the time we have for this class. But if you're one of those people that just get their work done in the afternoon, that's cool too. All right. To the slides. So you have your slideshow open that I posted about 15 minutes ago. You are looking at Unit 4 still. We are still talking about agriculture. We are still talking about growing food, right? And we've talked about a bunch of stuff before spring break. We talked about crop rotations and we talked about GMOs and we talked about genetic engineering. We talked about um, irrigation, water use, right, and how that affects crops. So everything we've been talking about, how do we affect crops? How do we grow more food? How do we get more efficient at it, right? Well, here we go. We're going on to another one. Lesson 6 is the cost and benefits of pesticide use, okay? So as usual, slide number 2 is the agenda. So I'll let you look at that at your leisure. And then slide 3 is a review slide. Now this talks about how arable land, that means land that you can use for agriculture and farming, becomes desert due to a variety of causes, right? So desert meaning the soil loses all its nutrients and you can't use it anymore to grow anything. So there's a bunch of things down the side here, right? We know salt content, we know different types of farming, we know deforestation. There's a bunch of different reasons we went through last week. So check that out. You can also check out that link. It's a very cool link to the Smithsonian magazine where there's an interesting article about the stuff that we worked on last week. So that's kind of a review if you want to check that out. Moving on to slide 4, we see the objective. We, at the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain the costs and benefits of pesticide use. All right. So first real slide number 5. First thing you have to do is you have to define what a pesticide is, right? I think we all know what a pesticide is, but you have to define it. You know, the book definition, textbook definition, scientific definition. Pesticide is any substance that is used to kill, repel, or control certain forms of plants or animals. that are considered to be pests, right? So a pesticide is anything that you use to get rid of something living that you don't want living, that you consider a pest, right? And you would think, and we think that word pesticide, we think, okay, poison, poison, poison. And yes, for the most part, that's true, right? We use chemical pesticides to kill things. But there are many pesticides, that will kill one thing and not another thing. There are specific pesticides for specific reasons. So we're going to go through a few of those. Here are some of the subcategories of pesticide, right? Inside, think about side, right? The word that comes into my head, suicide, genocide, right? You think about these horrible words, so you understand what that meaning of side is, right? So pesticides is anything that will kill pests, right, or get rid of pests. So those are the words that I think of when I think of this, right? And it helps with the meaning of the rest of these. So the subcategories: herbicides, right? Herb is vegetation, plant. So an herbicide is anything that will destroy a plant, that will kill some sort of vegetation. The most likely one is weeds, right? You want to get rid of weeds, you go get Roundup or something, or some sort of weed killer, and you spray it around on your weeds on your lawn and you kill your weeds. That is an herbicide. There are chemicals in there that specifically destroy that plant. All right. Insecticides happens to be my favorite Nirvana album. Random idea there. But an insecticide controls insects. So there's different insecticides, different chemical compounds that will control, kill, um, get rid of insects, different, a wide variety of insects. So sometimes you can get specific insecticide for ants, and you can get specific insecticide for some other kind of beetle or something like that. All right. There are fungicides, which are used to prevent growth of molds and mildew. So again, some of these aren't super dangerous to us. We use fungicide. If you ever spray the mildew stuff in your shower on the tiles and stuff like that, that is a fungicide. There are chemicals in there that will destroy uh, molds and mildews, right? And then disinfectants. That's the most common one we use, right? Disinfectants are a type of pesticide. Disinfectants kill bacteria, right? So you have to look at it that way. All these living things, right? Weeds and vegetation, herbicide. Insects, small things that would be on crops. So insecticides are used very often in our agriculture. And then fungicides to get rid of mold and mildew, and disinfectants kill bacteria, which are a living organism, right? All right. There's a link down bottom that I want you to click on, not right now, but it is a sound clip. There are a couple of sound bites in here, 2 or 3 minutes, and they're very, very good. They explain pesticides and stuff very well, and a couple questions might pop up from those sound bites. So make sure that you do listen to them when you go back through this, or when you go through this for the first time. You can pause me if you're watching later. You can pause me and click on that link now and watch it, and then come back to me when you're done with it. All right, moving on to slide 7. So although, all right, so many pesticides, what they're supposed to do is you spray them on something, you put them on something, right? And then they break down. Their chemical compounds break down, and they become inert, less likely to hurt you or whatever. So many pesticides remain in the plant soil, and they break down over time, right? But pesticides and their byproducts may sometimes drift into the air, right? They may flow through the soil, and they may flow through the water cycle. And when they do that, when pesticides don't break down fully, and there's reasons why they wouldn't break down fully, there's plenty of reasons, but we won't go into that. But sometimes pesticides won't break down and disappear fully into their main components or singular components. Sometimes they will just break down into a byproduct, but then, and they'll get into the soil, they'll get into the water, they'll even get into the air. We call that bioaccumulation, the accumulation of these pesticides in something, in air, in water, in something. All right. And when they're in the air, when they're in the water, when they're in the soil, right, what's going to happen? We are definitely going to come in contact with them. So there is something that they're also spread generationally from mom to babies. So especially dangerous for pregnant women if you're drinking water that has pesticides in it, if you're in an area that uses and sprays a lot of pesticides. There was a documentary, I'll try to find it on Netflix, and it was about the banana industry down in, I think it was Costa Rica, and the banana farms. You see these people working on the farms and doing all these things with these huge banana bushels, and you see planes just flying over dumping chemicals on them, and it's getting all over them. They're wearing rain suits, and I mean, it's in the air, it's floating in the air. So if you live in a town or village, not too far, and the wind picks up, that stuff just moves through the atmosphere, right? And you can ingest it just by breathing it. So that's not good. And that's that last point there. Because of the widespread use of pesticides and the way they deliver them to crops, usually by crop dusting, they call it, and that's when they fly over and dump these chemicals on them. You can look up videos of that if you need to. People are always going to be exposed to these low level of pesticide residues, whether it be in the air or whether it be in their diets, because it's going to land on everything, right? And it's going to land on the fruit that you're trying to eat, because that's the point of it. So we'll get more into that in a few minutes. We are moving to slide 8. Slide 8. Okay, so when something isn't good, what happens, right? The EPA steps in, the Environmental Protection Agency, and they set limits. And this is weird. They set limits on how much pesticide can be on each food, right? So for each pesticide used, how much of it can be on food. So that's good, right? They say, okay, this pesticide's kind of dangerous. You're only allowed to have this much of pesticide A contained on all your food. Fine. All right. Well, that's the safe level. And they say, okay, well, if you're using pesticide B, you can have this much at a safe level. And you say, okay, cool. At least they're putting in these measures. And they say, okay, for pesticide C, you can only have this much amount on your food for it to be considered safe. Okay, great. So individually, that's wonderful. But what does industry do? Industry takes A, and they take pesticide B, and they take pesticide C, and they mix them together and they use that, right? So now they're using the safe limit of A, the safe limit of B, and the safe limit of C. But when you put them in on together, accumulation, right? The totality of that is a heck of a lot of pesticide. So they don't limit total, they limit the individual ones. And that's a problem, because that's the way industry and agriculture get around using extra pesticide. All right. There is another sound bite on this slide, and that sound bite is very good. It's about washing fruits and vegetables. And people say, okay, you can wash your stuff, right? Your produce when you get it home. That's fine. Some people wash just with water, not really going to help the pesticide residue. Some people use soap and water. That's effective, but soap can stay. Now you have soap residue on your produce or in your fruits and stuff, and that's not good for your digestive system. If you've ever eaten soap, you know what I mean. What they say is usually vinegar is a good way to go. So a light vinegar water bath for your fruits and your produce, and that should be enough to get rid of 99% of the pesticides that are on the surface of it. All right. Problem is, a lot of the pesticides soak into the fruits that are more spongy, to the produce that are more porous. So that becomes a problem. The picture on slide 8 is very interesting. The picture, or the graphic on slide 8, talks about the pesticides in produce, right? And on the left side of that picture, it's the dirty dozen. Those are the ones that are worst when tested for pesticides, and the ones on the right are cleanest. I found that interesting, because I always thought, I just assumed it was common knowledge. I always thought that if the fruit or produce was porous, if it was spongy, if it didn't have a hard outer coating, or if it didn't have a pure coating, like I'm thinking like an apple has a total skin around it, right? To me, that seems non-porous. It wouldn't allow anything through. So I would think that would be on the safe side of pesticides. And I would think something like a strawberry that has little holes in it and it's spongy can absorb, right, pesticides. So I thought that would make it worse. That's the case for some of them, but if you look at this, there's plenty of things on the left-hand side that are dirty dozen, like apples, that do have a solid outside or a solid skin. And then there's things on the right that are very porous, but they say are clean, right? I always thought bananas were the worst, but bananas apparently aren't too bad, according to this. So what it came down to, I think, and what I conclude, is that pests like the stuff on the left better. So there are more things that bother the crops on the left, the apple trees and things like that, right? Cherries. There are more pests that enjoy those things. They're sweet and everything else. When I look on the right, I see onions, right? There's not going to be a lot of pests for onions. There's not a lot of things that like onions because of the chemical and the smell and the taste of it. Avocado is grown in an area where there's not too many pests roaming around in the fields. So there's a reason there, right? So I think that's what this graphic is. That's what I came to. And that's what you guys should be doing. You should be looking at this stuff and sort of thinking about it, right? Like, oh, why is this? Why is that? Right? And just sort of come up with your own ideas. Um, but what does it say there? It says, so on the Dirty Dozen, they say, okay, if you really want to be careful, you can buy organic, right? And we know organic produce and fruits are things that are grown without pesticide. They're certified organic, meaning they didn't use any pesticides. They could have used natural ways to control pests and things like that, which we'll get into in a different lecture. So the left-hand side, if you're going to go out and buy stuff and you want to make sure that you don't have a lot of pesticide, you could always just buy organic on the left side. And on the right side, you don't have to worry so much about pesticide. So that's just it was an interesting picture to me because I know I buy, organic bananas for my son. And do I really need to? They're much more expensive, right? So we'll talk about organic versus non at a later time. Moving to slide 9. Slide 9, what are the costs and benefits of pesticide use? So these are interesting. 3% of Americans tested by the CDC, who we're very familiar with nowadays, had metabolites, had pieces of a banned pesticide called chloropyrifos. It's a neurotoxic insecticide. So 3% of Americans tested by the CDC had this banned pesticide in their urine. Okay, and it's banned for a very good reason. It's a neurotoxin. It's very, very dangerous. It's not good for humans. So they ban it, but for some reason, it's still 3% of Americans tested, and 3% of Americans, that's a lot of people, tested for it in their urine. Then you go to the next one. It's even more interesting. DDT. DDT is is a pesticide that is historically famous. Really, really bad stuff. They used to use it in gallons and gallons and gallons. They used to use it by the boatload because it's very effective at killing pests. Well, they find that DDT also has a lot of issues as far as birth defects in humans, and there was a lot of developmental problems with children that were exposed to DDT. So even in the 70s, so since 1972, it was banned in 1972. These are times in the 60s and the early 70s where people weren't worried about the environment right now. People weren't making these laws. Every time we see laws in our class and legislation in our class come in with like overfishing or anytime, we always talk about it. Anytime, humans, oh crap, we have to do something, right? Anytime that happens, we always saw that happening in the late 70s and the early 80s. That's when everyone started becoming aware, and the EPA, and whoa, let's fix these things, right? But this is in 72. So this was really bad stuff. And I'm not going to talk too much about exactly what it was because your assignment later is to look up a pesticide, and you might want to choose DDT. So they banned it in 1972. 99% of Americans tested positive for DDT degradants, so byproducts of DDT, okay? Even though DDT hasn't been used since 1972, 99% of Americans currently, 99, that's everyone. What? How does that happen? Well, if I'm the producer of DDT and I'm making DDT and I'm really, really getting rich off and I don't care about birth defects and kids having neurodevelopmental issues and all that other stuff, then what happens when they ban it? Well, if it's effective, hey, maybe we can take the DDT and we can take one molecule out and we can put another molecule in. Maybe we can rename it. Maybe we can do something different. Maybe we can take this and mix it with this and it would mimic DDT, but it wouldn't be DDT. So there's a lot of ways around things, I think is what I'm trying to say. And where there's a will, there's a way. So I think that's what's going on there. But not good. Very, very dangerous for us, right? Scientists don't have a clear understanding of the health effects of pesticide residues. So there's a difference between taking a pesticide and drinking it from a bottle as compared to um, just having a residue on a piece of fruit or having some byproducts, being exposed to some of the byproducts after it's broken down a little bit or something like that. So there's a difference, right? It's less dangerous, obviously, but how dangerous is it? And I think it's this next slide, slide 10. Oh no, okay. So slide 10. Slide 10 talks about the cumulative toxic loading. So what happens is each person accumulates and responds to chemicals differently, right? We all have different digestive systems. We all have different kidneys and different liver and different ways to purify our blood and to get rid of toxins. We all, heal from the flu a little bit differently. And so we're all different when we take things and we break them down, even just digestion of regular food, right? So that's the same for chemicals. When we put chemicals into our body, however they get in, they break down differently for some people. So, for instance, on a safe level, for instance, if you're taking medicine, right? Sometimes you may take medicine, a cough medicine or Advil PM or something, and your sister, your brother, your mother, or whoever will say, "Oh my God, when I take that, I get knocked out. I can't move. I fall right asleep." And when you take it, you don't. So we process things differently. Same thing for pesticides. So when we get these pesticide residue byproducts, whatever, into our systems, these dangerous chemicals, some of us process them and get rid of them really, really easily, really quickly. Others take a longer amount of time, and it depends on a million factors, which we won't get into. But if you're a person that doesn't really that doesn't process this stuff and able to get rid of it very easily, then what happens is toxic loading. You can have a buildup of some of these chemicals, which is a very dangerous thing. So evidence suggests that children are very susceptible to the adverse effects from exposure to pesticides. So there's a lot of neurodevelopmental effects. And if you think neuro and nervous system and you think brains and neurons and muscles and everything, so there's a lot of different issues that can come up when children are exposed to a lot of pesticide residue or pesticides in their area. All right. So obviously, this is going to make more sense in a agricultural setting than it is in the city, right, where you probably don't have too many pesticides happening. But again, you can argue pesticides. You can argue, okay, well, maybe there are a lot of different types, like insecticides. If there's a lot of people exterminating bugs and this and that in the cities, then that could also cause it too. But I'm thinking more crop dusters, planes dumping chemicals and that getting into the atmosphere and blowing all over the place. And you live in a nice town right next to a bunch of farms, and you don't even know you're inhaling some of this stuff. So that's not good. All right, moving to slide 11, here's some of the problems that can arise from different types of pesticides. And this is an interesting thing because when you think about societal problems nowadays, you think about a lot of things. We always think about cancer, right? Because cancer is very, very prevalent. We think about ADHD, right? There's a lot of youth and adults with ADHD. We talk about things like autism. Autism cases have exploded, exponentially in the last 20 years or so. Um, we talk about things like breast cancer for women. It's a very dangerous, very prevalent thing in our society, right? So all of these main ones have some sort of link to pesticides. So, for instance, the first one, there's a class of pesticides called organophosphates, and they have been linked to high rates of ADHD in children. Now, we're not saying it's the only factor, but we're saying, hey, children test very high for this pesticide in their system when they have ADHD. That's an interesting fact. The herbicide, atrazine, is found in 94% of our water supply. That's everywhere, right? That's been linked to birth defects, infertility, and cancer. So that's a problem. Women exposed to pesticide endosulfan during pregnancy are more likely to have autistic children. So there you go, right? And girls exposed to DDT, the one we said 99% of Americans had some trace of, girls exposed to DDT before puberty were 5 times more likely to develop breast cancer. These are really, really sobering facts when you look at them. Um, you know, the problem is, like, we know lots of things cause cancer. We know lots of things cause these things, birth defects, and we know that, right? But if I know smoking causes cancer, I cannot put a cigarette in my mouth and smoke it, right? If I know that drinking alcohol or doing drugs while I'm pregnant causes birth defects, I cannot drink. I can put drinks away and not do drugs. The problem with pesticides is you don't have a choice. You're being exposed to them without a choice. So just walking around, just eating food, right? You're thinking about that and you're saying, okay, you don't have a choice. You're being exposed to this stuff against your will without even knowing. So all of these diseases and all of these ailments that can happen, the breast cancer, the birth defects, the infertility, the ADHD, the autism, all of these horrible society issues uh, are happening against. We don't have a choice in it, which is sort of sad and interesting. So that is some of the hard hitting evidence. And you can say, okay, a lot of people say, all right, well, I just won't eat fruits. I just won't eat produce and fruits because that's where they spray all that stuff. Well, that's not going to work because you can choose not to, you can choose to buy organic produce and organic fruits, right? But what happens when you eat something that has ingredient? Everything has wheat in it, everything has corn in it, right? They're using pesticides to grow this wheat and to grow this corn. These pesticides are traced in ingredients in your food. So you can go organic and you can buy organic apples and bananas and great and feel good about yourself. But it doesn't mean you're not being exposed to it. Again, the water supply. Look at the water supply, 94% of it. So it doesn't matter. You're drinking water. You're drinking water as an ingredient in something. You're making tea. You're making coffee. You're doing whatever. You are exposing yourself to those pesticides, right? Even if you're filtering doesn't get rid of some of that stuff, depending on which one it is. So that's a problem, right? So you're just always exposed to this stuff, no matter how. And the only way to do it is to cut it off. To say, okay, you can't use this, and the EPA tries to do that, and they say, look, you can't use it. You can only use this amount because it's safe. But again, the accumulation. Okay, I'm going to use this much of this safe one, this much of this safe one, this much of this safe one, and this much of this safe one. So now I have 4 safe amounts, but together they're not safe. So and then there's the bioaccumulation thing, and there's the toxic accumulation thing if you can't get rid of it. So there's a lot of problems there. All right, moving on to slide 12. I believe this is our last slide. So, and here's another duh moment. Great, pesticides work. Pesticides make a lot more food than if we just let them go crazy. And there are natural ways to control this, which we don't get into in this lecture. But sometimes, if you have a pest, what you can do is you can introduce another insect or another animal that kills that pest, right? So you can have ladybugs on your crops, and ladybugs will kill a certain type of insect, right, or mite that has problem that affects someone's crops. So you can naturally control crops. You can grow them on a smaller level or whatever. But when you're trying to make mass amounts of food, to make mass amounts of money, to feed mass amounts of people, pesticides are very, very useful if you use them responsibly. And that's the problem, right? If you don't use them responsibly, we have issues. There has to be more testing. There has to be more control of it. There has to be more, okay, I know you're using the right amount of pesticides, but we tested the water in the area and it's high, so you have to cut down on it. There has to be more communication and more regulation, and that's not what is happening. So that's a problem. Anyway, the big duh here is the pests that these pesticides are killing, they're becoming immune to the pesticides. So we talked about antibiotic resistance in bio. Antibiotic resistance is when the bacteria that you kill with antibiotics, they evolve and they reproduce so quickly. And what's going to happen are mutations, right, during evolution. And some of these bacteria are going to be resistant to the antibiotic. And they're going to reproduce and make more resistant bacteria. Same thing with pesticide resistance, okay? The pests, there's going to be a mutation, there's going to be an evolution, there's going to be something where there are a small portion of the pests not being affected by the pesticide. And it could be a very, very small. But over generation, these pesticides, or these pests rather, they grow up, right? They reproduce and they pass their DNA on, which has this resistance to this pesticide. So over a long period of time, the pests, you have this huge community of pests that are not affected, right? So in the 40s, 1940ish, farmers in the USA would lose about 7% of their crops to pests. Okay, so that was acceptable. We know that we can't get them all, but so we're only losing 7% of our crops. Not a bad deal. 80s, 40 years later, the percentage has increased to 13% of losing your crops to your pests. So it's going up. So that's proving that pests are getting more resistant to the pesticides. The reason why is because as that number started creeping up from 7% was using pesticides, and we'd still lose 7%. As that percentages started over those 40 years creeping up, what did they do? They used more pesticides. So one year you only lost 7% of your crop. The next year you lost 10%. You're going, uh-oh, I think I need more pesticides. So you're dumping more pesticides. Over this 40 years, more and more and more pesticides were being used because that number was going up, but that number was still going up. So pests, it's proof that pests are becoming resistant to a lot of these pesticides. And it's estimated, I think, around 500 pests that affect agricultural crops have developed a resistance to pesticides. 500 different types of pests have developed resistance since the 40s. So you have to find other ways to take care of them. And that's where we're turning to natural means, right? We can always try to find another chemical, but we don't know what those chemicals do to us. And it's very hard to get pesticides passed now by the EPA. That's why people are still using older ones, because they were already approved. It's very hard to make up a new pesticide and get it approved by the EPA because we're all aware of all the possible dangers, and it takes a very long time for its approval. So people go to natural ways. People will introduce, like I said, another insect or something that will kill it. People will grow another plant next to it that will give that plant some sort of immunity to some sort of pest. So there's a lot of different ways you can look up natural pesticides. All right, I think that's about it. When we go to slide 13, you'll see the guided practice. Oh, the guided practice is 2 videos. You have a 2-minute video on pesticide drift. That's an interesting phenomenon, might pop up on a quiz. So watch that at your leisure. And there's another 4-minute video, which I find very interesting. I know Mr. Chalet would too. It's called Be Aware. We know we have bee problems. We know that most of our food chain relies on bees. If bees disappear, we are in some huge trouble as far as food production goes. And bees are susceptible to pesticides. So that 4-minute video is very interesting. So check that out. When you go to the last slide, the independent practice, this is all you are doing. So you are looking through the slides, you are studying the slides, because of course, questions on quiz, which is coming at the end of this week, the questions on quizzes come from those slides. So you're studying them, watch the lecture again, whatever. Checking out the videos, checking out the 2 sound clips I posted on there, which are very interesting. And all you're doing to hand in is you are going to research a pesticide of your choosing. So that's why I didn't talk too much about DDT. That's a very historically popular one. There's a lot of information. If you want to go that route, that's fine. You can easily find a list of pesticides just by a quick Google and see one that strikes you as interesting or whatever. I want you to choose a pesticide, and I want you to tell me a couple of things about it, which is listed right here on this slide. I want you to tell me what it was intended to do, right? We know pesticides can be bad or good or whatever. What was it intended to do? How did it get approved? What was its job? Oh, it's going to take care of 99% of all weeds in a garden without damaging anything. What was it intended to do? Then you're going to look at the costs and the benefits of them, right? So you're going to write a little bit about that. I'm not talking about an essay. I know you just did an essay on genetic engineering. I'm talking about a paragraph. I'm talking about 4 or 5 sentences max. Which pesticide, what it's intended to do, what did it do or does it do, what is it linked to, is it effective at what it was intended to do, right? So a bunch of just background information. I don't want copy and paste. I want it from your own words. I want to know that you actually read about this pesticide and you were a little into it. That's why I'm letting you pick your own. DDT is a huge one, so check that one out first, and then maybe try to find a more abstract one to write about or something like that. All right, people? All right, I'm going to go. You guys got, you got about a half hour left or 20 minutes left in this scheduled class to go through those sound bites and those videos. So I will leave you with that. Again, any issues, gotta private message me. If you make something up late, just private message me, and it's not a problem. I'm gonna yell at you, it's no big deal. I understand everybody's got things going on. So if you are late with something, private, I don't go back to 105 students and say, hey, did they do this now? Hey, did they do this now? It's impossible. So you have to let me know and take responsibility for your own grade. The grades in there are the grades for a 3rd cycle. There is one more thing I have to put in there. You'll see the empty column for the GMO genetic engineering essay. So I'll get that in today or tomorrow. And then that will be it for 3rd cycle. The stuff you're doing today and giving to me is for 4th cycle. Quiz, I don't know when we meet each other again because I'm not looking at the schedule. I believe it's Thursday. It won't be the next time we meet, but the time after that, which would be a week from today, I think, you would have a quiz also. So you're going to have a quiz on a bunch of stuff, but we'll go over that next time. All right, I'm gone. I'm out of here. Stay calm, stay safe, stay smart, and I will talk to you guys soon. I'm here all day. Don't forget, just because I'm off the live stream doesn't mean I'm not sitting here all day. So you can get to me all day. All right, bye.